Jumpin' In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Good evening.
And welcome. And here we are again, jumping into the stratosphere on a Saturday night here on Manx Radio. It is, of course, Jumping In, the best in modern and contemporary jazz with myself, H.
And me, Chris. Yes, welcome along to this week's show. And we have another one of our interview specials, more of which later on. Well, spring has definitely done its thing, and the arrival of my annual house guests announces the move into summer. Yes, the House Martins are back, as indeed are the other great herald of TT Fortnight, spurious speed limit signs sprouting up everywhere. Although I noticed yesterday they've all gained black baggies. Whether they're official DTI black baggies or not, who can tell? So what have you been considering on your potentially longer than usual drive home, H?
Ah, yes, 40 miles an hour all the way. Yeah, looking forward to hearing from Christian, a lovely guy. I've got the latest from Jonathan Blake. We'll be homeward bound with him. I'll be introducing Javier Otti, a bit of intrology, and something I dug out cleaning out the old music maestro's place, Roy Hargrove, with Oscar Peterson.
Again, from me, we try and quench St George's nemesis with our special guest. Can you guess who it is? We have droopy drawers for a special birthday. We slowly sink into Greenwich, and to kick off proceedings, another birthday boy and a star trooper to boot. 85 years young on May the 4th, and May the 4th be with him. Here's bass legend Ron Carter with the WDR Big Band and 8. Fantastic stuff, be they jazz legends like Miles, Herbie, Wayne, Lee, McCoy, or even pop legends like Billy Joel, or indeed even as a Grammy-winning film composer. If Ron Carter hasn't been involved with any major project for the last 60 years, it's hard to imagine why not. As the top go-to bassist for all the top artists at 85, he's still at the very top of his game and could be caught giving a tiny desk concert from his home during lockdown, ably supported there by the fantastic WDR Big Band on his 2015 release, My Personal Songbook.
Good stuff, and I think he's still going, Ron, I think, as far
He
as
is,
I
just
recall.
hit his 85th, as I say, playing live from home, still touring, still writing. So,
Brilliant.
Great stuff.
Not bad. If I'm doing that when I'm 85, I will be very happy. Jonathan Blake, the drummer, is nowhere near 85. He's got almost 40 years to go. He's 46, I think, or thereabouts, so 45. He's been around for a few years now and has been making quite an impression on the scene. I've got a couple of his albums. He's played with a whole who's who of drummers. Comes from a musical background. His dad was another Blake, John Blake Jr., the violin player, perhaps not quite as well known, but his son, well, he studied with the likes of Rufus Reid and Steve Wilson and John Riley, and has played with the likes of the Oliver Lake Big Band, Roy Hargrove and David Sanchez. His latest is out on Blue Note Records. It is called Homeward Bound, and this is a track called LLL.
also in music and jazz. I mean, when you listen to jazz, it can take on so many different forms, just like water can as well. Absolutely, absolutely. So, the idea, I mean, really the album sort of became Be Water after a series of events of traveling, we were on tour in 2019, and it seemed like every show was just raining every day, and traveling to different places. The last place we traveled with really, put the nail in the coffin was Hawaii. And being
Terrific stuff. Really enjoyed that one. I must admit, it is his latest on Blue Note Records, of course, and he has been on Sunnyside. I think he did his first one out in 2012 on Sunnyside. His debut was The 11th Hour, which I think we featured on the programme before, if memory serves correct, and that featured the likes of Mark Turner and Jaleel Shaw. Also played with Scott Colley. Homeward Bound, released in back end of last year, I think it was, if memory serves correct on that one as well. I really can't remember. They come out so thick and fast sometimes, it's impossible to keep up. Also, sometimes reading the liner notes on some of these albums, almost impossible when they do pale ink on a pale background. But I think, if I can read it correctly, LLL, composed, of course, by Jonathan Blake, with him on drums and cymbals, Emmanuel Wilkins, alto sax, Joel Ross, who's got several albums out, Kingmaker is a goodie, on vibraphone, the great David Forellis, who's played with Thomas Stanko in the past on piano, and Desron Douglas on acoustic bass.
There's certainly no shortage of good music around at the moment. I mean, Scott Colley, you mentioned there, his solo albums are worth digging into too. Really, really good stuff indeed. And speaking of really good stuff, time to catch up with another special guest, recorded live in the dressing room, with a small dressing room at the back of Ronnie Scott's club. We managed to catch up with pianist Christian Sands, and I start by asking him about his new release.
Well, Be Water is exactly that. It was something that I responded to so much. Hearing the analogy and the metaphor with the one and only Bruce Lee talks about be water and you should be like water. Yeah. It got me thinking about what that really means. Not only just as the property of water and what it relates to as the individual, but also in music and jazz. I mean, when you listen to jazz, it can take on so many different forms, just like water can as well.
That's probably the most fluid of all styles, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, the idea, I mean, really the album sort of became Be Water after a series of events from traveling. We were on tour in 2019, and it seemed like every show was just raining every day, and traveling to different places. The last place we traveled, what really kind of put the nail in the coffin was Hawaii. And being in Hawaii, and the bass player, Yasushi Nakamura, and I were on our way back to the airport, and we stopped along the way to kind of sort of a nice, it's hard to say a park, because when you're in Hawaii, I mean, everything looks like a postcard, right? But that's their park. And, we stuck our feet in the water, kind of like taking in the sights, taking in the sun in the water, and then a beautiful sea turtle appeared out of nowhere and swam up to us and sort of peeked his head out and kind of told us, hey, you got to make this album about water, and swam away. So that was kind of the thing that kind of said, okay, this album needs to be about water and fluidity and just really just being one with the moment, just like water is.
And is it true that your doctor at the same time said, hey, you should be thinking about drinking more water?
Absolutely. Many physicians will tell you, drink 6 glasses of water a day, make sure you're doing that. And I'm sure many of us do not do that,
True.
So it started with that. That was the beginning of the journey, was my doctor saying, hey, drink water.
Now it's your third album for Mac. Is that correct? So we had Reach,
Yes.
and then we had Facing Dragons.
Yes.
I did see, actually,
There is an EP.
Discog says it's a Reach Further.
Yeah, there's a Reach
But I haven't been able
Further.
to find a copy of that anyway.
Yeah, that's only online there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the last album obviously was very successful worldwide for you, and I guess since then you haven't really been able to tour at all.
Yeah, I mean, since the pandemic, we came out with this record, and we weren't able to tour it, which wasn't ideal. But the record did so well, which we're so happy for. And I think people really responded to it because it sort of spoke to what was happening in the world, which wasn't intended. Yeah. It was just something that was saying, hey, we're here, and we're just trying to be open to things that are coming to us, which we're not expecting. And 2020, I think no one expected that. So it really kind of resonated with people. And I think that's why it really did well. And also, we just had some amazing players on it. Yasushi Nakamura, Clarence Penn, Marcus Strickland, Sean Jones, Marvin Sewell. The list goes on and on. It's a great cast. So, we had a lot of fun with it.
So piano came to it as a quite young man. I think you started your lessons at 4. We're both from a musical family, and we were all thrown at the piano and thrown at the drums and various other instruments throughout the household. But when did jazz actually grab hold of you? Was that from your family as well?
It was. Jazz has always been played in my house. Growing up, my father was playing records, playing a lot of Miles Davis, a ton of Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk, Dave Brubeck, of course, and also Grover Washington Jr. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on, Duke Ellington. And so that idea was already there, when I showed up and my younger brother showed up. I started lessons at 4 years old, but on classical piano, but I would improvise on the classical pieces. Sure. And of course, you're not supposed to do that necessarily, and so after having so many teachers say, don't do that, there was a teacher that said, I think he should go to jazz studies. And so I started that when I was about 7. So, I mean, truthfully, I feel like I've been playing in the style of improvisation since I was a child. I mean, really out of the womb. Yeah.
So who are the cats do you think? You mentioned some of the greats there as well, the likes of obviously Wynton, Kenny, Marcus. Who would you sort of say was the major sort of inspiration for you?
That's so hard because everyone's an inspiration. There's so many sounds. I mean, with not even just piano. I mean, there's so many different artists. Wynton Marsalis, Louis Armstrong. I mean, just the way people do certain things. Duke Ellington. My younger brother. I mean, there's so many people that have something interesting to say, and you really watch what they do and listen to what they do, and you're like, okay, well, I'll try that. Let me check that out. Let me see what's happening with that. From the greats, Dr. Billy Taylor, Fats Waller was a huge influence. I mean, everyone has something specific and wonderful to say. Andrew Hill, Herbie Hancock, right? Absolutely. I mean, there's so many. Paul Bley, Bobo Stenson. There's so many musicians and also artists. I mean, I'm a big Pablo Picasso fan. I love Salvador Dali. I love everything he stands for. So it's really incredible. Georgia O'Keeffe. The list goes on and on. I'm a big fan of design, so I love Porsche design, and I love cars, and motorcycles. So I just love everything. Everything is an influence for me.
I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup. It becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
where do you feel the American songbook sits now in your canon for your repertoire?
Oh, it's so important, because it's something that resonates with so many people, amongst the original compositions that we're all creating in this generation. The standards are a reminder of what was once a really amazing, true idea and true identity of the American song, of jazz. From the lyrics to the content of what they were talking about, what they were playing about, it really told us what was happening during that time, and to find different ways to play them or find different ways to navigate through them is a really exciting part and fun part, especially when you have really great musicians on stage. You don't have to read any music because you already know it, so that's a great thing, but also just to experiment and to try to find different ways to tell that story. It's very much like film, where you'll have a remake of a movie or a remake of something that has been made a long time ago, and you kind of check out what the director has done with it. It's the same thing with us. When we're playing standards, you want to see, okay, well, how do we make this new? With the same things that are happening. And also the messages in some of these songs, they still hold up, and some of them you have to remember that they still hold up, so they're nice little reminders of like, okay, be kind, love one another. All these love songs, nobody writes love songs anymore. So listening to these love songs, listening to Nat King Cole, listening to Frank Sinatra, listening to how they play, how they sing, what they're talking about, what they're singing about, what they stand for is really incredible. So all that influences how we play the standards, what we like to do, what we don't like to do, and what the information is.
I was just going to say, it's been a weird old world. You were saying about loving the world and whatever. It's been a weirder world this last couple of years, of course, for so many, in particular for artists with lockdown. How's it been for you? Because for some people we've been speaking to say, you know what, it's sort of been kind of inspirational in a funny way. They've had time to go back, to sort of look back at their old stuff, to think about new things and perhaps take them in the new direction.
Absolutely. The lockdown was something I can't speak for everyone else, but for me, it was such a beneficial time because this was the first time I was home since I was about like 7 years old, So it took me back to 7 years old, which was a very scary thing for me. I've always been on stage, for the, maybe 90% of the year, and so in this particular moment, I had to be in touch with myself away from the stage. And who was that? So the inspiration came from finding out who I was away from stage, and that influenced who I am on stage. And I feel like that was the case with a lot of different musicians, a lot of different artists, whether you're writing, whether you're painting, and also just finding different things to do as well, because, unfortunately, I wasn't on stage playing the piano, so I had to figure out what else to do, right? Mm-hmm. And it pushes you in different directions. So like yourself, I was interviewing musicians, and which is a very hard thing to do. So I applaud you both because it's very tough. It's very tough, but we had so much fun. I call it personality work. So I was also hosting television shows, hosting on Instagram Live. I was doing a lot of different things away from the piano, which was a wonderful way to exercise creativity in a different avenue.
I think sometimes breathing space is one thing that we're all we give ourselves so little opportunity to catch up and take in what is around us because we're on the main prize all the time and working flat out. Now, I noticed, funny enough, you referenced a lot of the greats there, and I remember my dad, our father was a great jazz pianist too, but played a sort of post-pop, quite modern style, but he loved a lot of the early song work, and the first time he played me Oscar Peterson playing Round Midnight, I was so sucked in with these rich harmonies. Now, that's incredible. And as a child, I then heard Thelonious play it and thought, this guy is absolutely murdering this tune, whoever he is. But, you come around and realise the genius that was within that spirit as well. The use of electronics I was going to ask you about. How do you get on with that as a different sort of kit bag of noises and sounds? I see there's a little Yamaha keyboard sitting on top of the piano. Has that been something you've enjoyed to play with and get the sounds of different places from?
Absolutely. Again, you talk about revisiting yourself. I grew up playing keyboards as well as piano and really experimenting with sounds, with the Moogs and different guitar pedals on the Fender Rhodes and, really just creating things. And I sort of stepped away from that to just really focus on the piano when I was younger, going into high school, going into university. And so with the pandemic, I had some time, and I had a little bit of money. So I was like, well, let's buy a keyboard again, and let's kind of see what I can do, and also it's a part of the time. I mean, we're in an age where technology is king, and I respond to the organic. I love acoustic instruments, but I also love sounds, and I also love what they can do. So why not put them together? Why not see if there's a way that I can put them together? If there's a way to combine technology with the acoustic and blend it in a way where there's a beautiful harmony, and so this is my version of that.
And that's getting back to the fluidity you were talking about in water, really, that whole
Absolutely.
sort of melange and sort of shapelessness and things just coming together. We should, before we let you go, we should say you're no stranger, at least to a link with the Isle of Man.
Absolutely, yes. So my manager is originally from the Isle of Man, so this is actually fantastic. I know she's going to be thrilled that we are talking and we are having such a great time here.
Christian, it's been an absolute pleasure for you to take the time out and talk to us. We know you've got a busy schedule. We know you're due to go on live very, very shortly, and we're looking forward to seeing that set immensely. Can I just say, what a pleasure to have you on Jumpin In, and thanks very much for taking the time out.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
really quiet, meditative number there, which is simply called Roads to Meditation. And of course, as you might have gathered, the Rhodes is spelt Rhodes. Christian Sands playing there in a very quiet, laid-back, definitely meditative style. And what a charming guy he was, really lovely. He sort of looks quite imperious on the cover of that album, Christian Sands Facing Dragons. And you think, you thought he might get short thrift from him. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing was too much trouble. And he even did a couple of takes of our Sting ID and said, hey, should I try one in Manx?
He came straight in from the airport. The band hadn't even put their bags down, and he said, oh, sorry, I'm late, guys. So come through, I'll do it for you now. And he was, as you say, a very, very nice fella in the back room at Ronnie's while the drummer and the bass player were setting up and warming up. And if his music's new to him, well, there's plenty to explore. Some 16 recordings out, 9 of which as a leader. The last 3 on Mac Avenue are all really good. And he was a bit of a prodigy at his first recording, Footprints, which is a trio album, was released back in 2002, recorded when he was 12. Makes you wonder how we've been wasting all our time. Anyway, next from me, another sort of a birthday celebration. Whilst his actual birthday was in April, the latest recording from Paul Booth is not only his age, but also an album of 4+4. When is an octet not an octet? Well, when it's 2 different quartets playing together, and perhaps when it has 2 drummers and 2 bass players. From 44, here's Paul Booth and Blues in the Square. Blues in the Square from saxman Paul Booth, ably assisted by Alexander Ridout on trumpet, Andrew Bain and Shane Forbes on the drums, Flo Moore on electric bass, David Whitford on upright bass, Oliver Mason on guitar, and the ubiquitous Ross Stanley on piano, Hammond B3, and in this case, a Wurlitzer piano rather than a Rhodes. Sorry, Jeff.
Close enough for jazz, as they say. From Blue Note to Blue Asteroid. That's the label that Javier Orti is on. I confess it's an artist I rather enjoyed, I must admit. I'm fairly sure I picked it up when I was on a holiday one time in a jazz club somewhere. And I'm trying to think for me where the life of me where it was. Part of me is thinking it was in somewhere like Seville, but I could be entirely wrong. It might have been in Venice. Oh, I don't know. Somewhere on the continent anyway, somewhere along those lines. And I thought this is an interesting character. Hadn't seen him before. As I say, on Blue Asteroid Records. Here's a track he calls, it looks like it is Spanish, Lo que quisiera. Nice little number that. I wish my Spanish or Italian was better, as the case may be. Intrology is the album. Javier Orti with Julian Sanchez on trumpet, Javier himself on sax, Angel Andre Muntz on piano, Javier Delgado on the bass, and Nacho Medina on the drums.
Yes, there's no shortage of good music from people that even we haven't heard of in the jazz field. I forgot to mention before, actually, Paul Booth was also the man behind the Bansangu Orchestra. It'd be good to hear another one from them. Thanks for...
Bansangu, yeah.
Bansangu. And thank you for Ubuntu for sending that through to us. Well, that's about it for this week's show. A big thank you to Christian Sands for taking the time out to talk to us. And we've just got time to fit in a track from London-based keyboardist and pianist James Beckwith, featuring, among others, on the album Sam Rapley on sax, James Copus on trumpet and flugel, and Joe Downard on the bass. The album centres on mental health and well-being and takes its spirit from where he lives, the SE10 area of London, Greenwich in particular, where they all reside. A lovely mix of ambient, chill-out synth tracks and great jazz piano. SE10 is a treat. Here's Descent. Hope it doesn't bring you down. See you next week.
See you next week. Brussels is looming, I'm glad to say. Real Brussels.
Real Brussels.